It was the middle of the night in Gresham, Oregon. Inside a small ground-floor apartment, silence suddenly gave way to chaos. Neighbors would later recall hearing screams, crashes, and desperate cries that echoed through the walls. Yet no one called for help. Hours later, officers arrived to a scene so violent it would leave even the most experienced detectives shaken. Nothing was stolen. There was no forced entry in the way one might expect. Instead, every detail pointed to something far more personal, something terrifying. And at the center of it all was a young mother, fighting for her life until the very end. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Anastasia Hester, known to everyone as Annie, had spent her entire life in Gresham, Oregon. Her childhood was marked by hardship. Her father died when she was still a teenager, leaving her to lean on her mother and stepfather for support. Through those years of loss and rebuilding, Annie stayed deeply connected to her family, never losing her sense of resilience. People who knew Annie described her as dependable and strong-willed, someone who never hesitated to step up when needed. She was hardworking and had a natural talent for leadership, traits that carried into every part of her life. Yet what truly lit her up was her passion for games. Role-playing adventures and cosplay festivals gave her joy, and she was often spotted in local game shops around town. It was in that world of shared interests that she reconnected with Matthew Hester. The two had first met years earlier, back in 1999, when Matt was married to someone else. Life carried them in different directions, but fate, or what they believed was fate, brought them back together at a local game store. By that time, Matt was divorced, and this chance encounter soon turned into a new relationship. In 2008, Annie and Matt were married. A few years later, in 2011, their daughter Alice was born, bringing new light into Annie's world. But happiness in their home didn't last. Just 1 year after Alice's birth, Annie faced betrayal. Matt repeated the same mistake that had ended his first marriage: infidelity. Annie tried to forgive, but the foundation of trust was gone. With more lies and broken promises, she knew she had to make a painful decision. She filed for divorce and began life anew as a single mother. The change was not easy. Annie and Alice moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment. Annie gave her daughter the privacy of the only bedroom, while she herself slept on a mattress in the living room. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on her, Annie never slowed down. By day, she worked in an after-school program caring for children, and in the evenings, she clocked into a downtown call center. Her dedication was noticed, and over time she earned a managerial position, though the hours were long and draining. Matt's child support was unreliable. He often changed jobs, leaving Annie to shoulder the financial burden on her own. But Annie never gave up. Every ounce of energy was spent ensuring Alice had what she needed. Even after Matt remarried, this time to a woman named Angela, Annie kept things civil. The two families even shared dinners or outings for Alice's sake. Annie never lost her creativity or her love for the small things. At Christmas, she crafted handmade decorations for loved ones and designed personalized cards with photos of Alice. On weekends when Alice stayed with her father, Annie used the time to take on side jobs, often painting faces at local events. For her, staying busy meant both survival and expression. She carried everything on her own shoulders with quiet strength. But in the summer of 2016, that strength was met with unimaginable violence. On a quiet night in Gresham, officers were called to Annie's apartment. Inside, they uncovered a crime so brutal it stunned even seasoned investigators. Annie's ground floor unit showed signs of forced entry, not through the door, but through Alice's bedroom window. The window-mounted air conditioner had been torn out, and a block had been used to push it open. When police entered, the front door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was strangely undisturbed. Nothing was stolen, nothing ransacked, suggesting robbery was never the motive. Blood patterns told a horrifying story. Annie had likely been asleep when the killer struck. She tried to escape, running toward the front door but never made it out. She endured a vicious attack, over 60 stab wounds, many to her chest and head. The violence was so extreme that her killer even attempted to decapitate her. On her shoulder, carved into her flesh, were 3 letters, VXV. No one could explain what they meant. Was it a message, a symbol, or simply a cruel distraction left behind by a twisted mind? At the scene, 3 knives lay on the carpet, some taken from Annie's own kitchen block, and 1 folding knife that appeared to have been carried in by the attacker. Bloody shoe prints marked the floor, leading toward the exit. Detectives were left to wonder, was there only one killer or more than one? Fortunately, Alice was safe. That night, she had been staying with her father and Angela. Had she been home, she might have become a second victim. Neighbors reported haunting details. Some heard screams and crashing noises around 11:15 p.m. Others described loud arguments, slamming doors, even groaning sounds that went on past 1 a.m. One neighbor admitted they had turned up the television just to drown out the chaos. And yet, no one called for help. Only one person actually reached for the phone and called for help. That person was the victim herself, Annie. At 3 a.m., gasping for breath and barely able to speak, she managed to dial 911. It was the final act of desperation from a woman fighting for her life. From the first noises neighbors reported hearing around 11 p.m. until the moment Annie placed that call, nearly 4 hours had passed. For investigators, that detail was chilling. It suggested the assault was not brief. It was prolonged, cruel, and amounted to torture. Detectives were left searching for answers. They had no suspect, no clear motive, and no explanation for the strange VXV carved into Annie's body. The only thing they knew for certain was that someone had wanted her dead and had gone to extraordinary lengths to make it happen. Naturally, attention first turned to the people closest to her. Police contacted Annie's ex-husband, Matt Hester, and his current wife, Angela. They were informed of Annie's death and asked to come to the station. Investigators needed to know if there had been any tension, threats, or disputes. Matt insisted he didn't know of any enemies Annie might have had. He said their relationship was manageable, if distant, and that his only real concern was the well-being of their daughter, Alice. Matt told investigators he and Angela had been home all night with Alice and Angela's 3 children. They had spent the evening playing video games, then went to bed around 10 p.m. According to him, Angela was beside him the entire time, and she confirmed the story. She added that she was a light sleeper, and if Matt had left during the night, she would have noticed. Still, detectives couldn't ignore Matt's demeanor. He didn't seem especially shaken by the violent death of his ex-wife. His focus remained on custody arrangements and Alice's future. He described his feelings toward Annie as mostly indifferent, saying he wanted as little to do with her as possible. He admitted he had cheated during their marriage, but claimed they had an open relationship. According to him, Annie had also explored polyamorous relationships, including one with a couple she met at a pirate-themed role-playing event. Investigators quickly tracked that couple down, but they were cleared of any involvement. Physically, Matt also presented complications for investigators. He walked with a cane, struggled with a limp, and was clearly dealing with health issues. Considering the ferocity of the crime scene, the sheer force of more than 60 stab wounds, detectives questioned whether someone in his condition could have committed such an attack alone. Angela was also interviewed, repeating the same story. They had both been in bed by 10 p.m., scrolling on their phones until they fell asleep. Their household was chaotic. 4 children, a dog, and even tenants renting out parts of the property, including the garage. Angela's close friend Karina was staying in that garage and told police she was certain Matt and Angela had been home all night. She said if a car had left the driveway, she would have heard it immediately. Both Matt and Angela surrendered their phones voluntarily, and nothing incriminating surfaced at that point. With no solid evidence, they were released. Meanwhile, the search for answers stretched into the surrounding area. Detectives brought in search and rescue teams, who combed through the brush along the Springwater Trail with dogs and helicopters. The trail was notorious for transient activity and drug use, and residents of the neighborhood voiced their fears. Many believed Annie may have crossed paths with a dangerous drifter, but the deeper investigators looked into Annie's life and her custody battle with Matt, the less that theory seemed to fit. The idea of peaceful co-parenting was unraveling. Everything had changed when Angela entered Matt's life. What began as her simply renting a room quickly turned into a relationship, and from that point, tensions with Annie only escalated. Angela reportedly didn't want Matt communicating with Annie, and Matt himself became more insistent on having Alice full-time. Their struggle ended up in court. Just a month before Annie's murder, the ruling came down. Full custody of Alice was awarded to Annie. On top of that, Matt was ordered to pay more than $13,000 in back child support, plus nearly $30,000 in legal fees. The reality was stark. Neither Matt nor Angela was employed. The financial and personal strain was immense, and Annie had won. For detectives, one pressing question remained. How were Matt and Angela supposed to pay? Matt spent most of his time at home, pouring his energy into fantasy writing and the creation of elaborate role-playing games. He even managed a YouTube channel alongside Angela, where he shared his fictional worlds with a small online audience. But when it came to the reality of the thousands of dollars owed to Annie, back child support, and court-ordered fees, Matt and Angela had no income to fall back on. Their explanation was that they were full-time caregivers. They claimed their children struggled with mental health issues, and because of that, they received government benefits and financial assistance. Angela's ex-husband, Aaron, told investigators that this very obsession with diagnosing and medicating children had ended their marriage. He said Angela constantly believed her kids needed prescription drugs, even when doctors disagreed. To him, it was dangerous and unnecessary. Aaron also revealed that Angela's focus eventually shifted to Alice, Annie's daughter. She became convinced that Alice was bipolar, a claim Annie strongly denied. Annie grew fearful that Angela was attempting to use Alice's name and condition as a way to gain additional benefits. Experts later confirmed Annie was right to worry. A licensed psychologist explained that labeling normal developmental behavior as mental illness was harmful, and official diagnostic standards for bipolar disorder didn't even exist for children under 6. The conflict escalated further when Child Protective Services received a report accusing Annie of neglect. Annie didn't know who had made the call, but she was devastated. Though the case was quickly dismissed and deemed unfounded, the emotional toll weighed heavily on her. In an email to a friend, she wrote in anguish, "I just don't understand. What did I do to deserve all of this?" For investigators, motive was becoming clearer by the day. Custody, jealousy, and money, 3 powerful reasons for Matt and Angela to want Annie gone. But motive alone wasn't enough. They still lacked the evidence needed to prove involvement. The detectives brought the couple back in for further questioning. Matt surprised investigators by voluntarily removing his shirt, showing no cuts or scratches. In a case where the victim had fought desperately for her life, detectives believed the killer would almost certainly have injuries. Yet Matt insisted he had nothing to hide. He acknowledged that people might assume the ex-husband was responsible, but denied having anything to do with Annie's death. Angela, for her part, said little during questioning. She kept her head down, complaining she wasn't feeling well. But then, she introduced new details that contradicted her original statement. She admitted that at around 3 a.m. on the night of the murder, she had actually been awake. According to her, she had taken the dogs outside, then suddenly became violently ill, so ill that Matt had to help her shower and change clothes. This new account placed both of them awake and moving at the very hour Annie called 911. Still, without hard evidence, detectives were forced to release them again. But this time, they launched covert surveillance. What they found was alarming. Footage showed Matt moving around with no difficulty, carrying heavy shopping bags, doing yard work, and walking without a cane. The frailty he had displayed in the interrogation room now looked like an act. Even more damning, a neighbor's security camera captured a vehicle leaving Matt and Angela's driveway just before 1 a.m. and heading in the direction of Annie's apartment. Their housemate Karina, who was sleeping in the garage, had told police she was certain she hadn't heard anything. But now, detectives questioned whether she was protecting her friends. The contradictions piled up. Matt and Angela had lied, and the facade of innocence was quickly unraveling. By the 1-year mark, Annie's family was still waiting for answers. The brutal nature of her murder made it impossible to accept silence. A reward was offered for any information that could finally bring justice. But as the months passed, the case remained unsolved, and the killer of Annie was still at large. The pain Annie's family endured was indescribable. Her mother later said she would never want another parent to experience what they had. The grief, the unanswered questions, and the silence from Annie's absence left wounds that could not be healed. Public appeals followed. Police urged anyone with information to come forward, emphasizing that whoever had done this needed to be found. For Annie's family, there could be no peace without justice. Meanwhile, Matt and Angela had quietly relocated nearly 700 miles away, making cooperation with the investigation more difficult. But detectives pressed on. They were patient, knowing that forensic science might uncover what human testimony could not. Then came the breakthrough. DNA tests were completed on the knives collected from the crime scene. The results were undeniable. The blood and DNA matched Angela. In October 2017, over a year after Annie's murder, police tracked Angela to Pocatello, Idaho. There, she was arrested on 2 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of first-degree theft. As she was taken into custody, Angela erupted in anger, shouting that she had children at home and demanding answers. Despite her protests, detectives stood firm. She was now charged with intentionally killing Annie, and prosecutors added another count, alleging deliberate acts of torture. If convicted, Angela faced life in prison, and at that time, possibly even the death penalty. But she pleaded not guilty, maintaining her innocence despite the mounting evidence. Detectives turned again to Matt. They showed him photos from Annie's autopsy, hoping to break through his indifference. At first, Matt continued to deny involvement, but then he admitted that Angela had come home the night of the murder covered in blood. He claimed she was panicking, and all he did was help her clean up. He insisted he had no idea what she had done, though he also admitted that he and Angela had often talked about killing Annie in the past. Still, Matt tried to deflect suspicion onto others. This time, Angela's ex-husband Aaron. Detectives interrogated Aaron thoroughly, but found no evidence linking him to the crime. He was never charged. Court records revealed the gruesome details of what Angela was accused of doing, stabbing Annie more than 60 times, attempting to decapitate her, and carving the letters VXV into her skin. It was a crime defined by rage and cruelty. The most damning evidence came from a Google Maps search. Just 3 days after the murder, Angela had looked up a location in Mount Hood National Forest. Detectives followed the trail and discovered a boot buried beside a tree. It matched the bloody shoe print found at the crime scene. A diver later recovered a plastic bag nearby, containing Angela's clothing. The tread pattern, size, and purchase records all tied directly back to her. The evidence was overwhelming. As the investigation deepened, another disturbing detail surfaced. Annie had a $100,000 life insurance policy. Her parents were the beneficiaries. Yet shortly after her death, a call came into the insurance company, not from them, but from Matt. He casually inquired whether he or Alice might be eligible for a payout. When told no information could be given, he hung up without another word. By 2019, prosecutors had built their case further. Matt was charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count of solicitation to commit murder, and 1 count of hindering prosecution. Like Angela, he pleaded not guilty. But the weight of evidence became impossible to ignore. In 2020, Angela changed her plea. She admitted to second-degree murder. While a change in Oregon law meant she no longer faced the death penalty, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Matt's fate came later. In 2021, he pleaded guilty to soliciting Angela's brother to commit murder as well as hindering prosecution. His sentence was light compared to the gravity of the crime, just 56 months in prison, less than 5 years. Many saw it as a controversial decision, but prosecutors believed it was strategic. If stronger evidence against Matt emerged in the future, they wanted to preserve the option of charging him again with conspiracy to murder. An acquittal would have made that impossible. Angela and Matt divorced while behind bars. Angela has never spoken publicly about Annie since her arrest. When asked by visitors, she only says, "That's between me and God." Angela's children entered foster care, while Alice was adopted by Annie's mother. In the end, Alice found safety and love within the family Annie had always wanted to protect her. Those who worked with Annie remembered her as more than a victim. She was a source of inspiration, someone who worked tirelessly, carried heavy burdens, and still managed to create joy for others. Her positivity, even in the darkest of times, left a lasting impression on everyone who knew her. And even in her final moments, Annie showed what she had always embodied: strength, resilience, and a fierce determination to fight. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.